Calling the meeting to order today. This is the 25th anniversary. Yay. The Sachse Historical Society. Rah, rah, rah. We're meeting here today at 2 o'clock at Charles Smith and Sons Funeral Home. And we appreciate Charles just excuse this. I know today there's a funeral downstairs.
I'm sorry, we got pushed up here, but
That's gotta be, that's a part.
they're paying down there.
Well, we paid you.
Haven't got the check yet.
You haven't cashed the check yet? No, but seriously, there is a funeral down there. It's a young lady, 29 years old, that died, and kind of a tragic situation, so we need to be, respectful of the situation, which we are. I'm not saying not, but we just, it's not a problem up here at all, and we appreciate you letting us use this. It's not a problem at all. We always open our meetings with the word of prayer, and we've asked Mr. Cullen King, one of our city councilmen, to do that, and then we'll proceed forward.
If you're comfortable in doing so, please rise. Father in heaven, we ask your blessing and your wisdom on this meeting. Father, we are so appreciative of those people who look back and help us to remember our history. Father, without looking back at that history, we're destined to do the same mistakes that we did before. Father, we have such a rich history that we're just grateful that we can have this organization to do that. Father, during these kind of messy days, Father, keep us safe and watch over us. Father, help us just to stay healthy, and most of all, Father, just help us to live our lives in accordance with your will. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. And those of you who have been in our meetings and have transcribed the meeting from the recording to the minutes, need to give Cindy, where is Cindy? Need to give her a special round of applause for being able to comprehend all this stuff. It's a job. Those of you that, but we do need to go through the minutes. Are there any objections or any updates, changes, or whatever to the minutes? Does everybody get a copy of the first off? There's plenty of them here. We got Do I hear any objections to the minutes or the motion that we?
I move to accept the minutes.
All right, Ms. Trish Leslie makes a motion that we accept the minutes as read. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Ms. Diane Smith makes a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? The doors are. The next thing on our agenda is Ms. Diane Smith. We have got a bunch of financial updates for the year, and so I'll let Ms. Diane explain those in extreme detail, every check, every penny, every dollar. Thank you.
Okay, this first page is the end of year 2014. We actually had some money at the end of the year 2014. But with the EDC grant and our own money that we contributed, we really now have a balance of little under 3,000. But we did have an accountant this year help us just straighten all the accounts out. We had 2 accounts, and now Roger will be so thrilled, the only one besides myself, that we got to, we had an operating account and a project account, and it was just, we tried to keep the money separate, but when we, after talking to the accountant, she assured us that if we combined them, as long as we kept paper records, there was no problem. So we now have one account to keep track of. And now it'll be real easy to keep track of it because, like I said, we have $2,700. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
I object.
Anyone besides Roger
That
Grant?
is way too easy.
She makes it sound easy.
We like it. We like it.
Okay, well, that's great. I can sit.
Thank you, Dan. Well, we did, there for a while, there was always, usually things that get started have a good reason to get started. So there was 2 different accounts, and they were necessary at one time, but it got to be kind of an accounting issue. There's not that much going on here, so, I mean, not that much money going on, so we decided it was best to just combine this. So anyway, the next thing that we have is we need to approve the budget for the next year. And Diane, you want to cover that?
I forgot about that, didn't I?
there is a there's a budget, proposed budget list in there that you
Oh, I'm sorry, I breezed over that. And again, Roger, this was so much easier to come up with one budget. We just combined all the accounts and, it's a little less than last year's amount of money. Although this year we have to do quite a bit. You can see the exterior building maintenance, the onion shed that covers the fire truck is, some of the supporting beams are cracking, so we need to put some money in on that. So that's where we're trying to spend our money this year. So if we can, we need to make a motion on the budget and approve it if there are any questions.
Second.
Okay. Done.
Sandy Baker made a motion that we, who seconded the motion? Trish Lindsay seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. We have, the next item on the agenda is to approve the Board of Directors officers for this year. And if you look at the list, let me find the list. Where is the list? This stuff is supposed to be in order.
This is in my
We
way.
appreciate Mr. Lloyd.
He's right here.
Right there.
Lloyd has been with this organization since day one. I think he took a little hiatus there for a couple of years. But he's been with us since day one, and he has been the vice president. He would like to slow down just a little bit, but because he's doing other things around here. Cullen King has been suggested as to replace Lloyd as vice president. Dinah will be remaining as treasurer, just assuming you all vote to do so. And Miss Cindy Mitchell has agreed to do the secretarial chores one more year. We have a few new people that have come on as directors. Trish Lindsay, she's been a very busy lady, and her and Diane working on stuff over there, getting things, a whole bunch of others. If I start mentioning names, I'll get loose and forget someone. And Jim,
Joe Mathis is right here.
right in front of you, yeah, okay. I'm just Patty. He's come on as one of the new members and as a director. And Ed, where's Mr. Ed? Well, there he is, okay. He and I are the two TIF board, original board members. And, we're still hanging, but Ed's come on with us. And we've run across several people in the last few weeks that are interested in the organization here. And anybody else that you know that would like to come on. Anyway, the thing we've got to do right now is we have this nomination tonight. Entertain a motion that we accept this list of officers as the executive directors of the Sachse Historical Society Board of Directors. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept.
Ms. Cindy makes a motion. Do I hear a second? Second. I hear a
Roger.
second, but I don't, oh,
Roger
Roger makes a
Brown.
second. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, so we are now updated on that. We'd like to tell you what this past, I've been with the group here about 4 or 5 years, I guess. The first couple of years that I came, I was gone for about a year, then came back, and we talked about a whole lot of stuff over the time that I've been around. And it seems like with some intervention by Mr. Lloyd Henderson and the EDC, we were able to accomplish about everything that was set out in the goals previously. So I'd like Lloyd to come up, and he's going to give a brief rundown on some of the things that we have accomplished, because that's what our budget goes to, that's what people support this organization partially to do. And then right after that, there's a list of goals. Those of you that get the newsletter will see pictures of the accomplishments that we made at the museum. Those of you that can go over and physically see a lot of the changes and updates and things. There's not a list in the agenda here of that, but there is a list of the goals that we have. But Lloyd, would you kind of refresh everybody's memory on things, Bishop?
Bobby, I've been reminded also, Virginia has been on the board for years and years and years. She went on when she was a young lady, and look at her now.
She still looks like a young lady. What are you talking about, Lloyd?
But Virginia has been a very vital part of this board.
It still will be.
A lot has been accomplished because she got it done. So Well, as been said, we did publish a list of the things that we have done this year, mainly because we want you to come take a look at it. We put our emphasis and our major thrust on redoing the museum. We became very much aware that the museum has been there for, 10, 11 years or so, and not really any changes have been made. We upgraded the outside with farm machinery, but the inside we've never really done any major work on. So this year we concentrated on an overhaul of the museum with what we call the Museum Improvements Program. And we want you to come over and see what we've done. We've removed the walls to make the room bigger. We've brought new cases that are tall enough that you don't have to bend over to look at stuff. We've refurbished the jail. We've redone the jail and put it back like it's original. And we built a storage shed outside to put stuff in because we have been always short on the storage space. It's taking up so much room. So there have been some major improvements, and we want you to come by and take a look at it and grab one of the board members if you want and have them explain some things to you. If you've got any questions, just explain it, and they'll explain it to you. Now then, that's what we've done. Now let's take a look, if you don't mind, at what we are suggesting that we work on for this coming year. Now, I want you to understand also that a lot of times people think that the board of directors is the historical society. We are the ones who conduct business for you between annual meetings. Each month we have a meeting, and we conduct the business of the society. We are very project oriented, so that we do a lot of projects. And it's not the board's duty, so to speak, to do the projects. We want to get you involved in the projects. We want you to become a part of them and help out, and this is your organization and not the organization of the board of directors. So I want to make that clear, that we want you to participate. Now then, in years past, we've always just given you a list of about 5 or 6 things that we plan to accomplish during the year. This year, we're kind of changing it up a little bit. We have come up with some things over the years that we have listed as things that we eventually need to do, to get done. And so you'll find that list on the last page. And some of these items are short-term items, some of them are long-term. Some of them are free items, some of them are going to cost some money to do them. So the board of directors, during the year, we will call through these things, and when we find out how much money we have to work with as project money, which really amounts to about $1,300 a year, actually, is about what we have to work with for project. We try to match that with the projects, and then we try to eliminate the ones that don't cost money and get them done by volunteer labor. Now then, as been said, we're going to major this year. Our projects is directed toward maintenance. We have done some outside stuff in the past, and it's come time now that we're going to have to maintain some of that stuff that we've let go. And the onion shed where the fire truck is one of those projects that we're going to hopefully give some attention to. There are things like we have a collection of 2 or 3 boxes of pictures that need to be put in acid-free containers and restored and preserved for the future. That's one of those things that doesn't cost money, but it's going to take time and volunteers. And then as you read down through the list, there's some other things we need. We need additional display cases. One of the things that we found out when we redid the museum this year, we pulled out some stuff out of storage that we had that had not been displayed before. And you'll see a lot of stuff over there that you've never seen before. And so we pulled those out, but the problem is it takes up space. And so now and then we're trying to find more space, more cabinets and that kind of thing. There's preservation of some of the outside farm machinery stuff. And I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have, anything on this list. We do not expect to accomplish this year. We hope to accomplish it sometime. And a lot of the things we hope to get done, but some of these things are things that we are just putting on our list so that we won't forget to get them done sometime in the future. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about any of these projects. And then let me preface that by saying, I found out a long time ago that in the board meeting, if you have a good suggestion, everybody turns to you and says, okay, you do it then, you know, that kind of thing. So don't worry about that now. If there's something on here, on this list, that you would like to be a part of, well, let us know, and we'll try to build something around you and the committee to get it done. So if you have any questions, otherwise I'm going to sit down. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. I appreciate your perspective on all this. Lloyd's kind of got a unique perspective on this whole project because he was a city manager here for 14, how long were you? 15 years. And he saw the facility we have at the museum was a city hall when he was there. And I remember coming over, I met with you a couple times, just going there and take care of business.
Pay your tickets.
Now then, it's kind of a, place that we can, store memorabilia and stuff like that on. And also, thank him and the city, I appreciate Mayor Mike, Charlie, and Colin, our city council members, and our esteemed mayor being here, but that's an honor that you come, guys. And we appreciate the EDC helping fund. Lloyd didn't go into much detail on that, but the EDC funded about $12,000 worth of the renovations that we did. We put in $3,000, and that helped us complete all these projects that you get to see hopefully here in just a little bit. We also appreciate all the work, man. There's been ladies and guys doing stuff over there, sorting through pictures and organizing things and putting labels on and putting stuff in cabinets and different things. And that's just a time-consuming job. It's not fun, but it takes time. We appreciate all the folks that have participated in that. And I appreciate Eileen and your husband doing the work on the newsletter because it is very nice. It's very nice. We got a 4-page, this time a couple of extra pages inserts with some pictures of some things that have been accomplished. Printed a special 25th anniversary. Just very nice. Appreciate your work on that. That just adds a little extra spice to the operation here. We have a special young man that's here and his family, I guess. Matthew, still, would you come up here? I want Trish, get a picture of Matty. This is a young man that helped with the scouts, and appreciate your work. I saw you out there. It was you were busy for a good while. And your crew. How many people did you have helping you all together?
About 14.
14. Oh wow. Okay.
Shake hands.
Sure. Let's get a good smile like that. But I appreciate your coming and doing that because I know who all now did all your folks back here help. I think I saw.
They did. And the weather wasn't nice either when they were working.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it very much. They did a lot of work over at the museum, tilling up the place, fixing the soil, getting all the stuff cleaned up and straightened up. And you'll get to see some of it get to go. But we appreciate you very much, man. Thank you. Matthew still. And let's see, where did Miss Virginia go? There. Well, don't look surprised. You've been with this almost since day one too, I think. And she's been one of the ladies that kind of helped keep track of the membership and sending out notices and stuff like that. And we appreciate all the work you've done. And she's not leaving, I don't think, for some reason didn't get on this list, and I'm so sorry about that. But Miss Kathy, we've got a few other people I'd like you to make mention of right here.
Alrighty. Now you're all here today and that's awesome, and you're going to get a chance to go over and see the museum, which is even more awesome. It's changed so much. You're going to be shocked, some of you that haven't seen the in-between steps. But the public that gets to come see this comes and gets to see it because we have volunteers, and they're monthly volunteers. Those folks who will show up on that Tuesday afternoon between 10 and 1 and make it possible for folks like yourself and others to come in and see what we already love ourselves. And 3 of them are here today, but I don't see Martha and Wayne Long, and I don't see Jack Wellneck. But for the 3 who are here, I have a little memento, a little thank you. They all love to read, so there's some cool little bookmarks in here for you to something small, but just to tell them we appreciate what they do. So I'm gonna call your name, and I want you to come on down. Maisie Wheat. Come on, girl. I think they're gonna want us to move left, girl. So, come this way. You don't get to go away, Maisie. You come on, get your picture. Irene Smith.
Hey there.
Come right on over here. And Anna Morris. Yeah, these are like my standby fun people. If you come on a Tuesday, I hope they're the ones that get to greet you along with my other three. If you know someone who'd like to join this fun group and make it possible for others to enjoy all those things that we love and appreciate and inspire us, then please tell them about us, give them my name, have them stop by, check out our website, and join us in this adventure. It would be
Come
lovely.
together. Come together. Very nice. Very nice.
Thanks, Kathy. Tell you what, Kathy does a lot of work up here. She's been a resident volunteer for quite a while, and she's just a busy lady along with everybody else. One of the previous presidents are here. I know Lloyd, and I see Karen back there. Who else has been president of the organization that's here today? Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys coming and being here as usual. Let's see here. And like they mentioned, it costs $20 to join the Historical Society. That's not very much money to be a member. It's really nice to have as many people as possible. I was at the city council the other day, handed out the little brochure that I did, went through the Inquisition, the interview process. And we call it Inquisition because they get that cat of nine tails and they get really vicious. But I handed out, and I found two people that were there at the meeting were interested in the Historical Society and contacted us about joining. So you just never know where you might run into somebody that has an interest.
I think my dues are due.
Well, I tell you what, I've got mine had the wrong address on it. I went to the post office the other day, and the lady at the post office behind me said, Mr. Tillman, they got your mail in the wrong box. And somebody gave it to me, so she had it, I guess, up at the main post office in Garland. I've been doing it for 40 years. But anyway, and I haven't paid my dues. I got.
There's no name place.
If anybody needs a membership form, we have some.
Let me give this to the person that handles this stuff. But no, it's an interesting thing. We meet every month. We meet over at the Historical Society office. We meet about 9:30. We have a good time. We get to talk, visit. We try to accomplish some things. We try to set forth some goals. One of the things that we have each year is the Veterans Day event. And we've tried to, the city kind of supports us in that. And we're trying to build it up. And it's this will be the fourth year or fifth year. It's not been going on real long, but it's got, I think it's the fourth year. And Janice, who had to be out today, has been instrumental in making sure all that stuff runs smoothly, getting all the people and everything. But it's beginning to build up, and we have a good attendance. It's a nice time to honor the veterans and the folks that are involved in the military services. But the primary program is today, and then the Veterans Day, and then during the month we try to do special events and things. But anyway. Are there any other volunteers that I may have overlooked? I don't want to miss anyone. Sometimes I miss someone unintentionally. All right. Well, we have a special privilege today. One of our esteemed colleagues, Mr. Charles Smith, is here. And I think most of you know Charles. He owns a facility that we're in. And we appreciate him letting us use that. I mean, he's going to speak to us for a little while. And we have two special guests here. Charles, you come on up and he has some interesting comments.
I think it was either in December or October, or December or November, I was hunting down at Lukenbach, and it was midday, and I was sitting on the deer blind, and my phone ding-a-dings. I looked, it was Cindy Mitchell. So she said, "Will you speak at our March meeting?" I'm thinking, what am I gonna talk about? I don't have a clue. So while I was waiting, I think she just assumed that I was going to. So when I finally contacted her back, she said, "Thank you," and I had really agreed to. But it took me too long to decide on it. To give you a little bit, I moved here in 1972, but prior to that, and I'll go back a bit further, during World War II, I was born in Paris, Texas. My dad and his three brothers, four of them, came to Dallas to join the military in 1943, which you were right in the middle of World War II. My dad was not accepted in the Army because he had a physical problem. So on the way back to Paris, he stopped and got a job and went back and got my mom and I, and we moved to Sachse. Believe it or not, we lived on the Barger home place. Anybody know what the Barger home place is? Yeah. She knows. Yeah. Anyway, it's right, there's a road to where the Christian church is now. Turn right down there. It's where the Barger's family lived, and we lived in their house down behind them. Which, if you're not aware of, it's where Kroger sits today. It's where their barn and their house was. It was kind of off the house. So we moved there in 43, lived there till 45 or 46, moved to Garland. I moved back in 72, so I've been here for a little bit. But I would like to, the things I like to mention, and I had to call Martha King Williams, which some of you know Martha. She's born and raised right here in Sachse. And I talked to Craig Jones, which is still a Saxeite. So I had to do a little bit of research on this. I really didn't know what to talk about. I mean, Cindy said, "You just tell us about something." I'm thinking, I don't have a clue what to talk about. Because if you live here, have all of you read this book? Everybody? Have you ever read this book? Anybody ever read this book? This book, Craig Jones, his mom, Mary Eileen Jones, authored this book, and it really tells you a lot. Now, what you have to realize, Mr. Sachse and Mr. Herring came to this community about the same time. Mr. Herring had 2 children. Mr. Sachse had 10. Now, the kids intermarriage, so that's where all the problems begin, because when you ask somebody here, I'm an old Saxeite. Whether you're from the Herring side or the Sachse side, because you really don't know, because when it goes back. Mr. Sachse died in 1899, and Mr. Herring died in 1892. Mr. Herring died about 4 years before the railroads brought through. So there's a little difference in their age. These 2 men own more land than the size of Sachse is right now. Sachse is 9 square miles right now. These 2 guys own more than that. They owned all the way past 544, way over to the west, and they own a tremendous amount of land in here. So as the time came about, their children, and there's this, Roger Brand is a descendant. Other than Roger, who's descendant of the Saxon family? Virginia. Okay. Gene, okay. So there's 3. So if I make a mistake, okay. So I'm just going by a little bit of what all of you know Martha Williams, Martha King, and what Craig told me, and what I read out of this book. But these 2 guys own most of the land in this area. Mr. Sachse was one that's instrumental because Mr. Herring had died prior to the railroad. So Mr. Sachse is one that brought the railroad into town. He was kind of instrumental in getting the railroad here. And as time came past, most of the Sachse family lived on this side of the railroad track, over here. There's a few families over on the other side, but most of them live over here. Now you have to bear in mind, those of you who hadn't lived for a long time, Sachse, you come out of Garland, you went down through the creek, around the creek bottom, which is Christ Road, comes back up, and it came right in front of the Christian church, up to where Highway 78 is now, above the bank, and it turned, and it came up to where Allsup's is, and turned back south. That little area between Ben Davis and where it turns back also, that was all the frontage that Sachse had. That was it right there. That was pretty much the town of Sachse happened within that short period of time. At one time, according to this book, there was like a bank, a post office, all that was here in Sachse. The school that you see down here. As the time went by, Mr. Sachse lived up the way here, and he supposedly moved into town during the early 90s and built a house up here, about where the Christian church, where the Assembly of God Church is, kind of on the corner. And he lived there until he died in 1899. But he moved up there. He only lived there a short period of time. He just lived up the road here until he moved there. As time went by and the city started to grow a little bit, the streets become named after some of the people that lived here. DeWitt was named after part of the Sachse family. Mr. Sachse lived right here on the corner of Sachse Road. Now Floyd Street that runs beside of the funeral home right here, that street really belonged to the railroad. It was called Railroad Street, that's what it's called. And it still belongs to the railroad or whoever. The city does not own that street that runs along beside the Assembly of God Church and runs right along beside this funeral home. The city does not own that. The cemetery owns this portion here, and the church owns that portion over there, except maybe just a little bit where the caboose, is that right, Lloyd? Where the caboose sits, I think, or, anyway, those two streets never belonged to the city of Sachse, but they've been maintained by the city of Sachse. A lot of people think we're Sachse streets. So, if you drive around Sachse and look, Ben Davis Road was named after Ben Davis. Ben Davis lived right here on the corner, and his brother, Tom, and Ben Davis's son, Gail, put all these streets, put all this addition behind this right here. So all these streets behind, right behind me, are all named after Gail Davis's kids. You got Tina and Ty and Todd, all these streets back here are named after the Davis family. Kelly and Tina, all up here right there. When I moved here, none of these additions are here. The Davis has not built anything. The first addition built in here was McDermott Street, right here. Other than the original street, Sachse Street, and DeWitt, that's it, as far as the town went right there, Sachse Street and DeWitt. Then there was Billingsley, Boone, and what's on the Alexander on the other side. Those three streets and these two streets, that was it. That was the core of Sachse. So Mr. Sachse lived on the corner of Sachse Street and 3rd and Railroad. He lived right there, and his house was there until the 60s, I think, early 60s is when they tore the old original home place down that Mr. Sachse moved to in the early 1890s. So as Tommy Roan developed the area across the way, it was the first large development called Sachse South. Now all those streets are named after the South, Dixie and whatever those streets are. But look, that area right there by the railroad track, that's the first new area. I guess it's the second. Sachse Ranch Estates was the first 3 streets that was developed, and it was quite a while before Tommy Roan built that. And then the Davises built this, and then where's the third, the big one left? Brian Salmons. So Brian is his first name, Salmons is his last name. So there's a Brian Street, and there's a Salmons Street. His wife is named Jewel, his mother's name Lily. So you got Brian, Salmon, Lily, and Jewel in that neighborhood up there. So you got the within the Brian Salmon's neighborhood, you go back to some Sachse family, and in there you got Arizona and Missouri, which has 2 states, but that was the Sachse kids. And you got DeWitt, James, and then over there's Boone, and then Clinton, and James, and Abby, and William. All that's over in the Brian Salmon's area. So he developed that. And then this Davis family, so within these, other than Tommy Roan, other than these, the names of the families end up as part of the streets in there. It was hard, it was kind of hard to go back and look at all these because as I mentioned earlier on, the Sachses and the Herrings married. Sometimes you ask somebody today, like Roger's been, I know Roger, they said, we're old timers. Well, if you're old timers, which side? Are you on the Sachse side or are you on the Herring side? Because it's so intertwined within that period of time. Mr. Sachse came here as a young man. He went to Paris, Texas, and married a lady. He moved back here. He only had one son. He met that one son he had. And then that first wife died, and there's no real record of where that first wife is buried. His second wife, he had 10 children by. Mr. Herring, first wife, I don't think he had any children. His second wife, he had 2. And his second wife is buried over on Murphy Road. And his first wife is buried down Maxwell Creek Road. Well, it's Maxwell Creek Road, all the way over in the city of Murphy. There's a cemetery over there. It's Maxwell Creek, and there's another name to it, cemetery. You know where it is, Lloyd? I don't remember
Yeah,
it's a Maxwell Creek Cemetery. That's where Mr. Herring's first wife is believed to be buried over there. But Mr. Sachse's first wife, no one knows for sure where she's buried. But his second wife is buried here in this cemetery. So Mr. Barger owned the property over here. He owned a big farm, so there's a street named right up here after his family. And those of you who live here a long, long time, everyone knows Lee Hudson. Lee had the grocery store right here on the corner, and everyone knew Lee Hudson, because he was just a community guy. Everyone knew because he lived in a grocery store and everybody shopped in there. So if you go up and turn there by Discount Tire, there's a Lee Hudson Street back in the area right there. And then back where Hooper Road is, I was talking to Craig Jones, and Craig said, well, Hooper Road got its name because the Hooper family had a big peanut farm up there, and the road ran up to their peanut farm, and they just named it Hooper Road. He just went up there to the farm. Then it eventually went all the way over to 544, and then it became impassable. When I moved here, you could go Hooper Road all the way to 544. It was a gravel road. And down this way, you could go 544 down Maxwell Creek Road. It was a gravel road. So, if you drive around town, you see how the streets have changed and all the names has come on them. The old timers that live here, I'm talking sometimes, and I hate to say this again, I often wonder how far back do they know where the lineage is or which side it is. You have to have it all on the wall. Is it shown on the wall in the historical building? No. The lineage? That's a pretty neat thing that we had over there.
We're working on it.
On the wall, in the building, you can look at the main characters and you can go down the lineage of the people that you hear and know of where they come back to in that lineage, which is a pretty neat deal over in the historical building. This Blackburn Road, I talked with the lady. Blackburn Road is named after a commissioner. His last name was Blackburn. Now, in Sachse, there's some of the streets are kind of crazy. Right in front of the funeral home is 5th Street. You go a short distance, it comes DeWitt, and you go a further distance, it's called McCreary. So it depends on where you are on the street is what the name is. And the same thing is Ingram. And you go down a little bit further, it's Blackburn. It used to be Blackburn all the way, and all of a sudden it became Ingram and Blackburn. So it's the same street, it's just a different name on which end. Depends on what 100 block you're in. Is the name. It's the same thing as right in front of the funeral home. So I've talked with the fire department about that a couple of times. Now, there's a Sachse Street and there's a Sachse Road. The Sachse Street was named after the Sachse family, this street right here. The Sachse Road, when you come from Garland through Sachse, wound around and went all the way back around, it was Highway 78, went around to Muddy Creek and back into the south side of Wiley. It was just Highway 78. And then once the main road got cut through in the mid-50s, the road right here, when they come through in the 50s, they had to buy property from Brian Salmons and the Bailey family, the Smith family, to run 78 right along the railroad track all the way into Wiley. And that's when the Sachse Road, I think, became the Sachse Road. It hasn't always been, you look back on the records, that hasn't always been Sachse Road. It was Highway 78. But since Highway 78 moved up here, that becomes Sachse Road. Then it's a Sachse Street. A little bit confusing, but it's 2 streets here in town. So, going back and looking at some of these things is kind of interesting. On the streets and these people's names, all of them I didn't get. I did some research and I'd asked people, what about this town, what about this street? There's a couple of streets within the neighborhood, Billings and Alexander. I don't have a clue how they got their names. But Boone's in the middle, and they come
Billingsley's were in the
from.
family.
Yeah, Billings.
Billingsley's were in the family.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. And I asked a couple other people, they didn't know. I asked Martha and some other, but I do know Boone came within the family, and it's kind of in the middle there, so I didn't know for sure about the other 2. So that's just, information that I just kind of went and looked up. It's interesting to go back and look how Sachse has come about, how it's grown. If it hadn't been for the railroad track coming through town, Mr. Sachse is so instrumental in getting that. If it hadn't been for the railroad track, probably Sachse wouldn't be here. It was just a farming community. And then when they cut the highway through, then today, they cut through the back of Joe Stone's property, which ran up, isn't that right? Joe, the family ran up to the railroad track, didn't it?
I'm not sure.
And they had to get to Joe Stone, Brian Salmon, they cut back the property. You could go down the road a little ways and drive a road here until it got to Woodford. They cut through the Bailey Road back into the old Highway 78. So I can remember a little bit of this back in there because I born right here and grew up in this general neighborhood, but I can't remember all the names of all the people who grew here, so. With that information, I'll just share that with you, and that's it. So, but if you don't have this little book,
I want to add a little
in
something.
this history about Sachse, it's a neat little book to read, that Mary Ellen Jones wrote the book, and she lived here, she was born right here, her picture's in the book, so it goes back, a lot of her lineage and her history that she wrote, she knows the people. I just heard of them, I don't know about them, so I just heard of them.
I just have one little comment I want to make, add to his statement about Grandpa Sachse's house being over here. It's where the parking lot is now for the church. And the story I have always been told was that when Grandpa Saxe made the deal with the railroad and he built his house there, he had property in Dallas also. So if he wanted to go to Dallas, he got out and stopped the train, and the train took him to Dallas. He got home and got back on the train.
Mr. Saxe donated the land for the train. So, I mean, and he was a good businessman. Mr. Saxe was a very good businessman. He knew if the train come through, it's important for him. So he donated the land. Now, right today, the railroad still owns an acre and a half right where 3rd Street, and the railroad crosses 3rd Street right there. There's an acre and a half right just to the west of there. And there's a little lake, a little pond down there. And that pond has been there since day one. The railroad had the pond built and dug to pull the water out of the pond, put it in a big tank, drop in the water into the steam engines. So there was a stop here. Mr. Saxe, of course, smart. He put together some things the railroad needed so they could stop here. So he had a little water tank for the steam engines to stop, and he provided water for them right here. And it's still there. The little pond and the little lake's still there. Right. It's an acre and a half, still belongs to the railroad. If you can look on the deeds, I think it's Santa Fe, I believe, still owns that acre and a half property right there.
Thanks, Charles.
You're right.
This guy should find where the names of these streets all came from, and I wish that Virginia could have been here. Her dad, Joe, helped name and number those streets. He took the name, someone been there before, but he would, I found out that he would help put the numbers on the streets, and if you needed something addressed, that he was the one to kind of take care of that. But it's, and Virginia, appreciate you adding some information. It's, that's kind of part of what we do here, just learn about the history of things. One of the things that I found kind of interesting is, over here, hopefully you guys get to go to the museum. We got a section of a tree over here that, and Karen, you know where that was cut from, don't you? That tree section, it was somewhere off of Miles Road.
Yes.
Did you say there's some pictures? I haven't found those, but.
I don't know if we have pictures of it before it was cut down. I don't know any.
What tree? Are you talking about the one that,
It's got a section of it over here.
The one that was on Miles, that they cut down from Miles Road.
There was a big debate with the city because they didn't want to cut it, and so we managed to save a little section of it. But anyway,
I have.
That's the borough.
yeah. That's what's over. And then Gil, my esteemed colleague over here, he took his policy and all that, fixed it all up, so you get a chance to see that.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
some of you know Ruth Robinson. She was over to the museum because she couldn't make it up the steps. When I was showing her around just a little bit ago, she left because we're all the stairs here. But she wanted to see the museum and see the changes, and I told her about that wood sitting there that he's talking about, that slice. She said, "Oh, wasn't our home place there?" And the two of the girls were talking to each other, and I said, "Well, do you have a photo of anything from that time?" And they said they would start checking and asking and see if they can find. So that surprised me.
Well, I understand that there's some pictures somewhere, but anyway, it's neat to have, preserve some of the history of our area. That's what we're here for. We have another special presentation, and who's going to do this presentation? The presenting? All right. Come on up. I'm under. Glad to have you. Thank you guys for being here.
My name is Ira Metcalf, and I'm a member of the North Texas Civilian Historians. And we basically cover 1840 to 1880, give or take. As civilians, we don't do any military interpretations, and as such, we cover everything that was done by the people who stayed home. Most of us deal with the 1860 time period, the War for Southern Independence, and depending on your perspective. And we enjoy a lot. It gives us a chance to interact more, and a lot of people are interested, how do people really live? The military is so documented and pretty structured, regulated and structured, whereas everyone who stayed at the home front did as best they could. And I've always had an interest in photography. And at one time, I was involved in an organization called the SCA, Society for Creative Anachronism, which they cover 6 to 1600. When I wanted to get back into photography, I had to pick a date after 1840. So this was the way to go. Cameras have been documented since around 300 BC, but it wasn't until the 1830s that they were able to make the image and keep it from turning black. They finally figured out how to stop the chemical process. And once they were able to do that, the technology exploded, because the people who were the chemists worked with that. The people who made the lenses for the cameras were the ones who were making microscopes, telescopes, glasses, eyeglasses. So the technology was there, they just needed that one little thing to keep the image from going black. Josiah Wedgwood in the 1760s, 1780s had worked on it, but it took a few more years. Now then, I'm working on a display so that whenever we go to reenactments, and I'm going to title it, "What Type is That?" Because when you start with photography, everybody wanted to have a type that they could patent and have their name attached to it. So every little improvement that they were able to get a patent on, they called it something new. And it's probably one of the most confusing things between 1835 and 1880. You had as many as 90 different types of technologies and photographs that were made. So I'm going to cover some of the earliest ones. Most of what we work with is up through 1870. 1871 was a break point. There were several dates that were special to photography because of the technology and what was done. As it was pointed out, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. A prime example is that in 1835, a gentleman from England by the name of William Henry Fox Talbot, who was an avocational inventor, scientist, whatnot, came up with a process to where you took a sheet of paper, sensitized it, did the exposure, took another sheet of paper, laid it on top, held it under the sun, developed it, and you ended up with the calotype, or Talbot type, since it was William Henry Fox Talbot. He wanted his type. He accomplished it, patented it, and didn't think of anything else. I mean, he did it. Okay, it's done. Now go on to something else. He's the one who termed negative and positive, which will be used forever. But he didn't really publish it. Now then, in 1839, Louis Daguerre, a Frenchman, came up with a process. But with this, you take silver-plated copper sheets. Oops. That's why I have some of these, because they are not in pristine. They're educational pieces, not museum pieces. But you take a silver-plated copper sheet, either electroplate or Sheffield plate. Silver plating was being done by the 1820s. And then you would take that, put it in a box with iodine fumes. Later that was improved, where you would use iodine fumes and bromine fumes. expose it, and develop it with mercury fumes at about 168 degrees. Okay, when you take the two processes, which should have been the one that took off? This one did, because Talbot held on to the patent like Sony did with Betamax. The French government bought his patent, gave him a lifetime pension, and turned this process over to the world copyright free. So, this was a total pain in the butt. You could fry your lungs with the bromine, eventually poison your brain with the mercury, but that was the one that was held on by patent. But the thing about it is, I don't know how many of you have been photographers, but when this was originally done in the 1840s, the lenses were so slow and the process was so slow that to take a photograph like of Washington, D.C. or something like that, it could take 6 to 8 hours. For those of you that are familiar with ISO, ASA, we're looking at, normally you think of 100, 200, 400, 1600. Okay, we're looking at an ISO of 0.5, 2. That's why when you see pictures of Washington, D.C. being built, it's like everybody's on holiday. Well, if you didn't stand there in front of that camera for 4 or 5 hours, you weren't in the picture. Now they have a program that where if you want to take a picture of a fountain, you take about 8 or 9 pictures, blend them all together with the software, and anything that isn't there in all the pictures, it's eliminated. Well, all you had to do before was just wait 5 hours, 8 hours, and you could have it just in one-time shot. The interesting part about this was that Samuel Morse happened to be in Paris when Louis Daguerre presented it to the French Academy. Morse took lessons from Daguerre at that time. He was back in the States doing pictures before the mail ship arrived, announcing what had been discovered and what had been presented. So, with the weather we've had, transportation hasn't changed a lot either. The next great advancement came in around 1853, 1855 with what was called a wet plate. Now, most people are familiar with wet plate process because of tintypes and because of what's called CDVs, carte de visite, visiting cards, business cards. This particular process, you take a sheet of glass or a piece of metal and, well, first you take cotton. I have a couple of bundles of good West Texas cotton that I'm going to be trying this with. You soak it in nitric acid, which makes gun cotton, nitrocellulose. You dissolve that in acetone, which gives you collodion. You take that and pour a film of it on the plate, the terminology, and while it's still wet, you stick it in your silver nitrate. It absorbs, actually silver iodide. It absorbs it into the collodion, the wet film. You take it out and expose it and develop it before it gets dry. So it was something that you had to do. This is why they could not take actual battlefield photographs until close to 1900. Even the ones you see from the Spanish-American War are sometimes staged 3-4 months after the fact. That's why all the Civil War photographs you see are battlefields, dead bodies all over the place, because they could not stop the action. It would have been just a whole big blur. Of course, also with some of those, they would take the same, in one case, same Confederate soldier, threw him in the trench with one rifle, threw him behind a barrier with another, and stuck him over in a tree with another one. And just tossed him around and put different rifles, and this is a dead sniper, this is a dead whatever. And A lot of interesting things happen. I don't have any stereo daguerreotypes, but within 2 years of photography being announced, you would see these. And what this is a photograph taken with 2 lenses or taken with a camera that's shifted over 2.5 inches, which is basically the difference between your eyes. And with the divider down, one side takes a picture that you would see from here to here. The other side takes a picture that you would see from here to here. You overlay those, and you end up with 3D. This happens to be an ambrotype. This is probably taken in the late 1850s. But this was so well done that, do you remember the kind of pictures that you could see on the wall where you would look through it, like look to infinity, and all of a sudden there would be dinosaurs or dolphins, or I forget the proper name for that. Anyway, you can do that with these. It's done in such a way that if you focus straight through the middle, just like with the stereo cards over there, you can, it's what's called free viewing, in that you don't have to have a viewer. You can just actually focus. Those 2 side pictures will merge, and you will see it in 3 dimensions. Interesting thing about ambrotypes is that if you just use it on the glass like that, take it on the glass, it's a negative. And this is why you had to back it or put it on, a lot of these were done on ruby or amethyst glass. Then you end up seeing the image just by covering the back up. There's been a lot of confusion over what these were cased in, and most of the times these are called cased images. To start with, you had pressed paper, paper mache, pressed leather, in little wooden frames. Around 1853, they started introducing thermoplastics. 1851, Goodyear patented hard rubber. You have hard rubber buttons that say Goodyear patent 1851. I evidently left it in my other wagon, otherwise I have a Goodyear patent vulcanized rubber apron that I would have had by 1858, easily. You'll find, people sell, and you will find these listed on the internet as gutta percha. These are called union cases. This is thermoplastic. Gutta percha is tree sap. This is rosins and lacquer and sawdust and coloring that's heated up. So there was actual true thermoplastics by 1853, 1855. There are a lot of these, once I got into this, there are a lot of these technologies that really surprised me, because you think of things as being new and modern. You know, they had silver plate dinnerware by 1827, 1847, because that's when William Rogers and his sons got into it. Dry cell batteries in the 1830s. Thermoplastics, rubber tires, hard rubber by 1852, in the market by 1852. So there are a lot of these things that we think of as being modern, but they had these technologies hundreds of years ago. In fact, just recently in doing some research, there was a gentleman by the name, and here again, I should say, forgive me for my French, but Niepce, who was the mentor of Louis Daguerre, had invented with his older brother in 1806 an internal combustion engine that ran on hydrogen. This is what most people think of when they think of Civil War photography. This is a tintype. Same process as an ambrotype, but this was the cheap cousin. Now then, if someone wanted to promote it, they would call it a ferrotype. Now that was supposed to be a little bit higher class, a little bit better quality. But these were CDVs, carte de visite, visiting cards. And these are wonderful for several reasons. To begin with, when ladies want to research what to wear, this is primary, what's called primary reference documentation, in that that has not been photoshopped. It may be hand-tinted, which adds even a little bit more, but that's exactly what they were wearing the day that was made, which is wonderful. If you look at the piping on the dresses, some of the color combinations, and yes, men wore pink jackets, and they wore plaids and stripes and spots all at the same time. Sometimes they wore brown and blue. You know, whatever happened to be, you know, whatever they thought was the fanciest duds they could afford at the time. But this has become so valuable in research as primary documentation, primary resources for women wanting to make historically authentic dresses and clothes. Men's fashions from the 1830s to the 1890s really didn't change a whole lot, because in some instances, if you could wear it, you got grandpa's frock coat. And so, yeah, there were some subtle changes from the cutaways to some of the others, but if you could wear it, you wore it. It was the ladies that would get the attention, might get that one or two, or in some cases, rarely 3 fancy dresses. And lots of times they didn't even wash them. They would hang them out in the rain so that they could be rinsed through with the rainwater to clean them out, and then dried either indoors or in the sun, and then quickly brought in where they wouldn't fade. But for research, and then sometimes you find these. From 1864 to 1866, the feds put a tax on all frivolous stuff. Playing cards, photographs, newspapers. And they also had the revenue stamps on the documents, just because they could. But on these, sometimes you will see, just like this one's dated 1864, occasionally you will find a tax stamp on there that someone has tried to jack the value up by taking one off of an 1870 document and sticking it on the back of here. I have a few of those that I bought just because, you know, to show what was done. But if this is dated 1864, 1862, 1866, then you have a pretty good idea that this was made in a northern studio during that time period. Some people collect these because of the backs. The photographer's or photographic artist's mark is something that can be most unique. Now there's some of them you could just order. Some of these are going to look very similar because you could order them out of the book. You just told them what you wanted in the nameplate, and all the rest of it stayed the same. But some of them were extremely elaborate and very well done and planned out. But one of the things that would happen would be if a young gentleman wanted to call on a lady, he would come up to the door, give his calling card, his CDV, to whoever answered the door, the maid, the butler, the mother. And if the young lady wanted to be intimidating, she would have a basket sitting right by the door with a pile of them, and they would just kind of toss it into the rest of them. One of the problems we've ended up with tintypes is that this one is probably very early in the 1850s. This one, this is American, probably. This is European, that could be as late as 1930. A lot of the antique people are buying in cargoes. of European antiques. On the continent, in Europe, they kept doing street photography with tintypes up until the 1930s. I mean, through World War I, almost to the brink of World War II. A lot of these are showing up as Civil War photographs when they are obviously Edwardian or post-Edwardian. You can tell a lot of things by the men's ties, for the most part, sometimes the hats, but when you get one like this with bowlers, bowlers came in fashion in 1840. So for the 1840s, there was a resurgence in the 1860s. Then you look at Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. You know, you have to be very careful when you're buying these to be certain that they are as they are represented. Just like with these, you know, sometimes you'll see them listed, you know, union cases, gutta percha, percha, and that kind of stuff. Well, that's somebody who's just laying out a bunch of things so that the search engine will pick up. But you must be very careful when you're doing this to know your subject, because it would be very rare to find this in gutta percha, just like you aren't going to find those kind of ties before 1911, 1908. Any tintypes this size are of this style. See how flimsy that is? Anything this big is going to be after 1880 for the most part. Because to make a wet plate, this would be done as a dry plate, which the technology came in 1871. So actually by 1875 you could have been getting this. But most of the time it was on a glass plate. By the 1880s you were getting tintypes like this, and hand tinted. This is a tintype on a button. This is probably pre-1860, pre-1865, 68 at the very, very latest. And this is not necessarily mourning. They did this in celebration of a grandchild or a child, or maybe this young girl made it to 6, and that was a celebration. In the same way, because of the technology, that is not necessarily a mourning dress. That could have been bright scarlet red. She could have been ready to go to a ball in that one. But because of the lenses and the technology of the photography, red, bright red, maroon, that type of thing. Purple turns out black. And you'll see these things listed, oh, she's in mourning. No, she's getting ready to step out. But likewise in documentation, if I want to know how to cut my hair, here you go. The value, of course, one of the reasons why I'm able to have a lot of these is because nobody bothered to write down who they were. And I've gone to estate sales, I have picked up boxes sitting on the curb with all kinds of photographs, because whoever stuck them in the album knew who they were, but they didn't bother to write it down on the front or the back. And it's gone. And the knowledge is gone, and people don't care. Why should I keep a bunch of photographs, particularly from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, if I don't know who the heck they are? I mean, it just takes up space, and I really have no interest in them. So, I hate to lose the possibility of coming up with cool pictures, but go home and write down in every photo album, document who those people are. Because at some point, the original memory and the original knowledge of who they were isn't going to be here. Just like the only documentation on the back of this one is that it was made from Garrett's in Wilmington, Delaware, and at one time it sold for $2. And then whoever sold it to me had already bumped it up to $2. Well, it's a cool picture, but that's all that will ever be known about that person unless we happen to find them somewhere else. So go home, document for the people who come after you, for the historians. As historians, do it for the future. Do it for the past. Because without you marking those photographs now, they will not be in the future. They will simply be a part of the past that will be looked over forever. When you get images this size, this came in after 1871, 1873, when they started using dry plates, and you could have large photographs to easily taken to use for negatives. This is called a cabinet card. And typically 1874 and later. They are, again, documentation, but chances of seeing something like this, something much larger than that, before 1870 would be very slim. Who grew up with these? At one time, it was estimated that the basement of the Fort Worth Library, they had close to 600,000 of them. Wow. This is how people learned about history, comedy, geography. There were thousands of photographers traveling all over the world, taking millions of these. And you could actually, by subscription, you could get sets of 200, 400, 600, 1,200, 2,400 each year, starting from the 1860s on, particularly by the 1880s. You see a lot of these 1890s. One way to tell the early ones from the later ones, in fact, I don't have any of the later ones, is that all the early ones were flat. Later on, they were curved. And they were typically on gray board, whereas these are on a variety. Now, there's one particular kind, and these are considerably more expensive. These are called tissues. And they are actually made on tissue paper. And they will color the backside of them. And where you have lamps or things like that, they will pinprick through so that when you hold it up to the light, the subtle colors come through, but you will have little dots of light at the end of every candle. Because these, at this particular time, it was all candles. Every chandelier, you would actually lower it to light it and clean it and then raise it to take it back up again. But these are typically a very early form. They are very fragile. And again, if somebody wasn't careful, they put a finger through there, and I can afford to buy it. But a lot of what I have is really nothing special, nothing exotic. I have accumulated as an educational purpose as opposed to collecting for value and for uniqueness and whatnot. I approach it from an educational standpoint as opposed to a collector. It's more an accumulation than anything else, but I have a lot of different examples, one each of a lot of different stuff. Cameras the same way. But anyway, I have a lot of fun with it, and if it's something that happens to interest you, I hope you all too. But again, I can't emphasize it enough. Go home, label the albums. It doesn't matter how insignificant. Write on there when, who, where, and why. And leave that legacy for the next people who come along, who want to go over to the Historical Society to see what was happening when it was. And I will, one other thing, this has nothing to do with photography, but for anyone who's interested in that particular time period, there was a steamship that went down in the Missouri River. They have completely excavated it, and it is in a museum in Kansas City, Missouri. And it is the perfect, it is to 1856 history that King Tut's tomb was to Egyptology, because they brought everything up intact. They couldn't find it for years and years because the river had changed course. This ended up, I believe, 30 feet down in the middle of somebody's field. And the trouble they went through, and to my knowledge, other than some of the alcohol, they did not sell any of it. You have all the tools, multiple thousand tons of supplies. You had pie filling. You had everything that was needed to supply 20 towns up the river. And but the Arabia, if you get a chance to go up there, they allow photography, and I think they're open 6 days a week. But if this is a period of history that you get into, make the time. And to leave it on a lighter note, I went to my physician recently, and I've had a lot of stress and pressure with family, with work, and everything. And he suggested that I take up a musical instrument. And I thought, how wonderful. So I took up the cello. Thank you very much. No.
That was very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Photography has always interested me, and if you notice, I think there's a few cameras around here. We're taking a few pictures and stuff. So, but thank you. That's interesting. Does anyone have anything of interest that they'd like to mention? I would sure invite each of you to come over to the Historical Society Museum. You can walk over there. You can drive. Not very far. I'd love for you to see some of the renovations that we've made, and we're real proud of the place. You know, it belongs to the city, as I think someone mentioned. You know, we're just the caregivers of it. Lord, you know, mentioned that. I believe we're kind of in charge of taking care of things. As you mentioned about the pictures and stuff, that is one of the things we're doing. I think we're going to do an article in the newspaper again in the newsletter about we're interviewing people here in the area. We've probably got maybe 75 or something I've done so far. Different folks, mayors and city councilmen. We've got these two gentlemen here, and our mayor, on we've interviewed them, and their record is on our website. And for down the road, you know, somewhere down the road, somebody, who in the world was that mayor? He was here somebody here for 30 years. Oh, that was back then.
And he's documented.
And he's documented. No, we appreciate everything you guys have done, but anyone in the area that wants to be part of that, you know, we would like to record everyone here. So, is there anything else that we need to do? We enjoyed it. If I don't hear anything else, I would entertain a motion that we adjourn.
David, and I seconded.
Somebody seconded it.
Roy made the first one.
Brian made a motion and he seconded it. Thank you guys for coming, and we'd like you to come over to the museum. Thank you very much.
One thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to add a postscript. For anyone using digital cameras, digital storage, don't trust it. If you want something permanent, get a print made. Get a negative made. I belong to an international camera collectors group, There was a professional photographer in England who was transferring files. He lost the bottom half of over 12,000 images. If you store it on a CD-ROM, expect those to be oxidized and worthless in the next 15, 18 years. Any kind of other magnetic storage, thumb drives, all it takes is a telephone, a magnetic source, setting it too close to something, and you will get absolute destruction. You know, get a print made, take a picture of it with black and white silver processed film. Otherwise, we're going to end up with probably 30, 40 years of images, history gone if we depend purely on digital, because it will not last.
Everybody make sure you sign the register. There's a sheet up here that we'd like to make sure we get everybody's name.
It looks like we missed you.
Do what?
It looks like we missed you there. I was standing there glancing through it.
Yeah, was there another page though?
Well, but don't